Welcome. I'm Erica Serino, Communications Manager at Plastic Pollution Coalition, and thank you for joining our February webinar, From the Frontline, Petrochemicals, Plastics, and Cancer Alley. Plastic Pollution Coalition is a nonprofit communications and advocacy organization that collaborates with an expansive global alliance of organizations, businesses, and individuals to create a more just, equitable, and regenerative world free of plastic pollution and its toxic impacts. We have 5 poll questions today. So to get a sense of who is joining us, we will ask these questions, and each question will only appear for about 20 seconds, so please answer quickly. Number 1, where are you joining us from today? Wow, from all over the world, as seen in the chat. This is really wonderful. Lots of representation from the US and Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the Pacific Islands, Central and South America, the Caribbean. All right, poll question number 2. What best describes the area of focus that you work? We have a lot of nonprofit representation, also many people in education, academia, businesses and corporations, and some government reps and healthcare and media as well. So all over the board here. That's really awesome. Thank you. Question number 3. Do you or anyone close to you live near a petrochemical or plastics facility? Okay, we're seeing a mix here. Some people are unsure, so hopefully we can address any questions during this webinar if you have questions about whether or not you do. Next question, please. Do you or any of your family or friends suffer from the following health conditions? We wanted to pose this question too to link again to the environmental injustices of the petrochemical and plastics industry, and we're very well aware of these and other health problems linked to this. So unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of issues popping up on the screen, and sorry to see this for sure, but hopefully we can address again the causes and the solutions to this problem and help address any questions. Next question. Which of the following actions would you be willing to take to help address petrochemicals and plastic pollution? Lots of different actions we can take. So thank you for weighing in on our poll questions. We appreciate getting this information so we can better serve you all. Okay, so today we have 3 incredible panelists. We are going to hear from Dr. Robert Bullard, Shamar LaVine, and Rev Lennox Ywood. But first, I'd like to set the stage for our conversation. Plastic pollution has been historically and inadequately described as a litter or an ocean plastic problem. In reality, it's far more than that. And we cannot discuss the full, true cost of plastic pollution without discussing, excuse me, the environmental injustices inflicted by industries and policymakers onto Black and other underserved communities. While all people are harmed by plastic pollution, people who live on the fence lines of fossil fuel extraction sites, pipelines, refineries, storage tanks, and plastic factories, shipping routes, landfills, incinerators, and waste facilities face the greatest threats to their physical and mental health, in addition to long histories of abuse by the systems that shape the mainstream world. Folks living on the fence lines are literally fighting for their lives, and they should not have to. Our panelists will show us that we cannot end plastic pollution until our world chooses to protect, serve, and bring justice to frontline communities, instead of turning them into sacrifice zones. Plastic pollution is injustice. And with that, I would like to introduce our first panelist, Dr. Robert Bullard. Often called the father of environmental justice, Dr. Robert D. Bullard is the founding director of the Bullard Center for Environmental and Climate Justice and a distinguished professor of urban planning and environmental policy at Texas Southern University. Dr. Bullard is the author of 18 books that address topics such as environmental racism, sustainability, climate justice, and community resilience. In 2021, President Biden appointed him to serve on the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, and in 2023, he was inducted into the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. His foundational work in environmental justice continues to have a positive impact on communities today. We are so honored to have you with us today, Dr. Bullard.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. First of all, I want to thank the sponsors of this webinar, And my talk, a few minutes that I have, I want to set the stage. Moving beyond petrochemicals and plastics will save lives and save communities. Over the last 4 decades, I've written a bunch of books, but this is especially important this month that we're celebrating Black History Month. If we look at the history of U.S., for example, America is segregated and so is pollution. I've written 18 books over the last 40 years that deal with housing, transportation, energy, environment, health, disaster. It's 18 books, but it's just one book, but don't tell anybody. Even though we've documented and chronicled the facts, having the facts is not enough. We must marry facts with action. So when we talk about what's happening, America is segregated and so is pollution. The development of America and the development of cities, counties, rural areas, we have created through our industrial policies, environmental sacrifice zones. And these sacrifice zones create different opportunities and different vulnerabilities. Residents in segregated neighborhoods in the US, for example, are 3 times more likely to have air that they're breathing that's creating environmental health threats. And these concentrations, depending on the type of pollution, in some cases can be as great as 10 times higher compared to when you compare people of color, what they're breathing and what others are breathing in our society. If we talk about the impact of toxic racism, and this is real, it's not imaginary. Toxic racism kills people and communities. This is a slide I took 30 years ago in Louisiana Cancer Alley. If we go to the idea of what plastic pollution and so dependent on fossil fuels, petrochemicals, what it's doing. As a matter of fact, I want to give you a framework. This is not new. It may be new in terms of some people who don't know the history of how historic location of these chemical plants, refineries, and polluting facilities in areas that basically were plantations, and we call it from plantation to plant. Town, a historic Black community where freed people were able to buy land from their former owners and develop communities. Town no longer exists because of Georgia Gulf Corporation that produced plastics for automobiles, from computer parts, medical supplies. And this community basically suffered. I took this picture in 1990, 91 or 92. And again, this is a community emerging out of slavery, Reconstruction, Jim Crow segregation that no longer exists. So environmental racism and toxic pollution will kill people and it will kill community. And again, this is a historic community. Another community, the old Diamond community in Norco, Louisiana, that was hit with not only one refinery but 2 in Norco. Again, Marjorie Richard, EJ warrior, a fierce fighter for her community. In this case, she fought the Shell, and again for at least almost a decade, fighting this company to get her community relocated and bought out from this refinery. And again, there were explosions. This is not a sexy topic. This is about death and destruction. And again, the residents of the old diamond plantation community or diamond community survived slavery. They survived Reconstruction, Jim Crow segregation, but they could not survive toxic racism that was perpetrated by Shell. And Shell spent $30 million to get this community relocated and bought out. It was not a relocation of a community because it was individual homeowners being relocated. The community was destroyed. People were scattered. So it was a bittersweet victory. And if you look at this fact, these are children who are across the fence line from in a park across from the Shell refinery. The most vulnerable people in our society are children. Toxic zombie plastic plants keep coming back even after communities kill them. Warriors, two grandmothers, tough as nails, take no prisoners, decided that they would not let Shintech locate in Convent, Louisiana, which is in St. James Parish. They fought a 2-year battle. They were able to keep Shintech out of Convent, Louisiana. Again, we're talking about PVC plastics. Again, this is the 90s now. This is not what we're talking about now. But these are areas where Black communities and Black leaders were fighting this for their lives. They were fighting for lives and fighting for their communities. This is another case in the 90s where Formosa Plastic was trying to locate in Wallace. This is not now. This was the 1990s. And again, this is St. John's Parish. They were trying to locate, and Black families who had owned land, bought land in the 1870s and fought. And Mr. Green, 70-year-old retired school teacher, fought. He led this coalition, was able to beat back Formosa, which is again a company that's based in Taiwan. So when we talk about the issue of beyond plastics and beyond petrochemicals, we are talking about a legacy of toxic racism that has really been with us from the very beginning, and that communities that have somehow survived the worst of the kind of toxic poisoning, the kind of locally unwanted land uses being sent to that community, things that other people don't want somehow being said, well, put it over there. That over there historically has been Black and brown communities. In Cancerata, Louisiana, a textbook case of pollution and industries that don't provide jobs, not for the fence line communities. They're for people who drive in, spend 8 hours, drive out. They leave their pollution, they leave behind death and destruction, and they leave behind poverty. In no case along the Mississippi River Chemical Corridor or Cancer Alley do you find the communities that are closest to the plant that these industries have brought economic renaissance. You find health disparities, economic disparities, and you find the fact that these communities are suffering. They need the kinds of infrastructure and jobs and economic development that will make them healthy, resilient, and sustainable, particularly in this area of climate change. We fight for clean and healthy communities and moving beyond petrochemicals and moving beyond plastics. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bullard, for your powerful words and for laying the foundation for all the attendees here to understand environmental justice and what it means for Black communities. I'm so grateful to have you here tonight. Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce another amazing hero, Shamar LaVine. Shamar is a native of St. James, Louisiana, and a third-generation human rights activist. In 2020, Shamar returned to her hometown to fight for environmental justice at Rise St. James, Louisiana, a faith-based grassroots nonprofit organization fighting for the eradication of petrochemical emissions impacting disenfranchised Black communities in St. James Parish and surrounding areas. Shamar currently serves as an advisor on the conceptual committee for the Frontline Resource Institute. Welcome, Shamar.
Thank you, Erica. And thank you everyone for joining today. My name is Shamar LaVine Davey, and I want to extend grace to Dr. Bullard and his excellent presentation. I look forward to Reverend Ywood taking us home today. I'm honored to be here. I have a brief slideshow of only about 8 slides that I want to give a brief description of what it was like growing up in Cancer Alley, my views on it. And also you will have an opportunity to take action right now during this webinar. So in a couple slides from now, I will ask you to take out your phone and scan a QR code so you can get that ready. Or if you're on your phone, get ready to do a screenshot, because we're going to get some actions taking place during this webinar today. Thank you. As you heard, Rise St. James is a faith-based grassroots organization that was founded in 2018. And before I tell you why it was founded, let me give you a little bit of history behind the Cancer Alley. Cancer Alley is an 85-mile stretch of road that extends from Baton Rouge to New Orleans that travels down the Mississippi River. I grew up in St. James Parish, which is a county in other states. We call it parishes here in Louisiana. In our parish, there are 7 districts in our St. James Parish, where I am from. In those 7 districts, it is split about half white, half Black. But of course, you can probably guess the 4th and the 5th districts that are predominantly Black is where the industries are housed in our parish. We know that this is based off of racism, and we recognize that we have been chosen as a sacrifice zone. Growing up as a little girl in St. James, I grew up in between the industries. And as a little girl, when we would pass by those industries, I would look at them and wonder what was going on there. I didn't know what was happening there, but the flames and the flares that would come out of the smokestacks, I thought it was some type of factory. Maybe it was where Santa Claus was making the presents. But it wasn't until I was an adult that I learned that those flares and the emissions coming from those industries was not a toy factory. It was actually chemicals being emitted. And it was why I was seeing so much cancer and sickness around me. I never imagined that those industries would be polluting us in plain sight, and that the adults and the politicians were not doing anything about it. In 2018, I cannot give this presentation without honoring my mother. In 2018, my mom found out about a $9.4 billion industry named Formosa Plastics that was excitedly announced on the news by then Governor John Bel Edwards, that this industry will be built 2 miles away from her home. In true Taurus fashion, my mom said, no, that's not going to happen in my community. And she was still a full-time teacher at the St. James High School when she decided to begin the Rise St. James. Once she began Rise St. James, she started off in her living room, and then she went on to learn how to figure this out. And in her late 60s, instead of her retiring from school and retiring from work and being able to stay home, instead, she embarked onto a purpose in her life that has led her to many different experiences later on in life. And that's a word to all the baby boomers out there who think that nothing can be done. Formosa Plastics. Formosa Plastics is the poster child of a bad neighbor. They have a track record of polluting the environments. If you would learn more about a case in Texas where Formosa was sued for polluting the waterways in Texas, and they lost, and the judge ordered them to pay a $50 million settlement to the state of Texas. This happened before Governor John Bel Edwards in 2018 announced that Formosa would be able to be built in Cancer Alley. They're not good enough for Texas, but Louisiana said you can come on in. As you see a list here of the different chemicals that Formosa would emit, and it would be the largest facility in the United States if it was built in St. James on 2,400 acres of land. Within a mile of that industry is our only elementary school in the 5th district where little Black children go. So in this fight, we not only have to fight the politicians, we also have to fight the federal government as well. We had to take our fight to court. And in September of 2022, we saw victory. Judge Trudy White sided with us and revoked Formosa Plastics permits. We were so excited. Formosa Plastics then appealed the decision, and last month, we got the devastating news that the higher court reversed Judge Trudy White's decisions to revoke Formosa Plastics permits. This is a devastating loss, but trust me, it is just the beginning of this fight. We know Formosa Plastics will not be built in our community, and here is how you can help us. Please take out your phones, as I mentioned earlier, and scan this QR code that you see on your screen. This QR code will take you to a petition that you can sign right now to take an action to help us. This petition is calling on President Biden to prevent and to revoke Formosa Plastics from being built in St. James Parish. If Formosa is built, it will be a death sentence. We are already suffering, and this is your time to sign this petition. The Army Corps of Engineers also has the authority to revoke the wetlands permit from Formosa Plastics, so they cannot be built either. So we are urging for the Army Corps and for President Biden to prevent Formosa Plastics from being built, and we need your help. We need your voice. Side note, I have also checked to see how many signatures we had before this webinar, because I will be holding you all accountable for signing this petition. We have another petition to Citigroup. Citigroup, also a subsidiary of Citigroup, is Citibank. Familiar with Citibank is one of the largest funders of fossil fuel projects. And we are asking Citibank to divest and to denounce Formosa Plastics, because Formosa Plastics is going to need funding in order to build their Sunshine Project in St. James. So if you go to this link, you will find another active petition that we have for the Citigroup petition. That is risestjames.org/Citigroup petition. Please sign that today as a way to help us and to make your voices heard. That is how you can support us right here, right now. Finally, here is more avenues that you can connect with us. Visit our website, follow us on Instagram, where we update frequently about what's going on. Also, you can find our Facebook page, where we are frequently updating what's going on with us, and you can stay in touch with us and reach out to us. I want to end with a quote by Jane Fonda, when she said, "There would be no climate crisis without racism." This is environmental racism. This is the sacrificial killing of poor Black people in St. James in order for the rich to continue to get rich. And we just have to call it what it is. As a little Black girl from this community, I'm going to continue to fight. I come from a legacy of fighters. It's not on me, it's in me. And we're going to continue. And I ask that you stand with us, and please reach out. And thank you for listening.
Shamira, thank you so much for sharing your testimony and for all of your courage and for activating our community here today. We appreciate you so much. Lastly, but not least, I would like to introduce our final panelist, Rev Lennox Ywood. Rev Lennox Ywood Jr. is the president and CEO of HipHop Caucus and one of the most influential people in hip-hop political life. As a national leader and pacemaker within the Green Movement, he works to bridge the gap between communities of color and environmental advocacy. He is a leader in campaigns calling for divestment from fossil fuels causing climate change, increasing diversity in the climate movement, ensuring everyone has clean water and air, and international efforts to address climate change. Thank you for joining us today, Rev.
Well, thank you for having me. Can you hear me okay? You can nod your head there, Erica. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, it's an honor to be here with you. I didn't know Dr. Bullitt was so funny, man. Dr. Bullitt, he wrote 18 books, but it's really just one book. Man, that was good stuff. I love Dr. Bullitt, man. He is such an icon in our movement. I hope people listen to what he said. And I hope that we give him and Dr. Beverly Wright from the Deep South Center, Peggy Shepard from We Act, and so many, their flowers for holding up, as we say down south, the bloodstained banner in this work. I also want to shout out my dear sister, Shamar LaVine Davy. I want to make sure, you know, she just got married, so I ain't want to, she's no more than Shamar LaVine. I got to make sure, add in her name now, and just applaud her and her activism. Our next generation of warriors in this work is we should be proud. We're ready. I can tell you that, from Shamira to Wawa Garut. I mean, there's so many who are ready to take up the mantle and keep fighting for justice. My name is Rev Ywood, he, him, his pronouns. I am the president of the HipHop Caucus. I wear a number of hats, literally wear a number of hats. I got one on right now, but I wear a number of hats. I just want to run through those real quick. I think they're important. One of those is I'm the chair of Green 2.0. So check out diversegreen.org. That's important because it's one of our organizations focusing on DEI and environmental movement, and particularly how we're treating each other and ensuring that we can have more women of color, Black, Brown, Indigenous, young people, people from the queer community at leading this movement. So I would hope that you would check out Green 2.0. Another group that I'm involved with to help on the board and founding of Third Act. It's a group for old people. And so it's we believe that for those who are the old Gen X and baby boomers, you got some work you can still do with Third Act. Just to say this for young people, my brother Bill McKibben and others help with the creation of that. And then HipHop Caucus. And just want to say right now, HipHop Caucus is up for 2 image awards, 2 NAACP image awards. If you go to my Twitter, I actually pinned how you can vote for our podcast on Deaths in Custody. It's a phenomenal podcast, but I would just hope you would go there and check that out. But let me get to, I think, the crux of what I want to talk to you about is how we win. We just had a win on pausing LNG and what needs to be done as a movement. We're in a serious time, very, very serious time. When I was in COP, the climate conference in Dubai, I had a conversation with Darren Woods. Darren Woods is the CEO of ExxonMobil. And he wanted to tell me how myself and others were wrong on petrochemicals. He was determined to tell me that. And I was like, nah, man, I'm not the one who was wrong on petrochemicals. What's striking about that is when I told him about cancer, I'm from Louisiana, if folks didn't hear that. I'm from Louisiana, northwest part of the state. What's interesting about what Darren Woods told me was that he didn't believe that the issue of plastics and petrochemicals was a health concern. He didn't think that. He thought the numbers were blown out of proportion. And that was startling to me because obviously we know about Exxon and we have the facts now. Exxon knew a number of things from the climate crisis and obviously regarding the health concerns regarding plastics and petrochemicals and fossil fuels. So I'm not going to buy too much into that part of the argument, but what's interesting that he made that argument, which shows that they are okay with creating a sacrifice zone and they're okay with creating communities called Cancer Alley. I'm not going to redo the phenomenal presentation from Dr. Bullard, but it's important that they are okay with killing Black and Brown and Indigenous people. They're okay with their business plan being a death sentence for those communities. And so we had to then ask ourselves, then, how as a movement have we not fought this battle along those lines? How is it as a movement, particularly in these spaces when it's sometimes predominantly white, environmental justice is seen as an afterthought? How are we having conversations when folks don't even know in the movement? They understand what's going on with sliver rise and coastal reefs, and they understand how much carbon is in the atmosphere. They understand particulate matter and soot policies and other policies. They understand about carbon capture and what they want that to do and what they don't want that to do. But how are they not understanding what's happening to Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities? And I would just say that that has happened. And if we fix that, that will be the thing that will allow us to win on climate. We have created a siloed, segregated, progressive, quote unquote, progressive climate movement. Meaning that when we hear from particularly Black and Brown and Indigenous people, it's obviously sometimes trauma porn. We want to hear about, oh my God, you're dying, or oh my God, Miss Sharon LaVine, you're so amazing, or oh my God, Dr. Wright or Dr. Bullard. We want to hear about the pain, but we're not working in solidarity with those communities to stop what's going on. And so what happens here is that we go back to our own communities. our own process of being reliant on fossil fuels, on plastics, on petrochemicals, and unless a train passes through, unfortunately, what happened in East Palestine, Ohio, then we don't recognize that we are all on the front line and the fence line of petrochemicals and plastics. And so to win on that, the key thing here is to break down the silos. The key thing here is that we need to do that. So how do we do that? He said, well, Rev, what do we got to do? Well, we all here on this webinar. That's why we're here. We want to figure out how to transition from fossil fuels to clean energy. So the first thing is in our leadership. We must listen to the front line and fence line communities, not in a way to just hear to satisfy some kind of trauma porn for ourselves, but listen to them for their wisdom, their guidance, and their instruction. We've seen that when we do that, from the Keystone XL pipeline to recently to the LNG pause, when we listen to frontline and fence line communities, we win. That's the strategy. That's first step. Listening to frontline and fence line communities. Second step, to stopping this siloed, segregated, progressive climate movement, is that we have to change our structure. We're asking the world to transition, but we ourselves are not willing to transition. We must have, I believe, a matriarchal, women-led climate movement that is led by really Black women of color and people of color leading this movement, not just in leading it from a standpoint of just one person at an organization, but as far as resources. We know from the New School, from the study they did, that out of the $1.2 billion that was distributed in regards to climate advocacy, only 1.2% went to EJ and women-led climate organizations. So that right there shows you your priority and your resources is not facing up and matching up. So we need to shift that. It needs to be a complete shift in priorities and how we're funding these groups. Because what happens there also, as a side note, because when groups come in here to work with groups, they begin to pit one group against the other. It's a terrible situation in some cases because they're fighting for limited resources. If we can expand the resource bucket to these groups, then we won't have that problem. The third thing that I think is critical where we are right now, and we saw it, is that we must not be afraid to put pressure on any administration. Let me say this before I go into the politics side of this, that if you are running for office and you are saying that climate change is a hoax, that is disqualifying for any politician around the globe, but definitely here on Turtle Island in America, that should allow you to run for office, because that there means you do not care about humanity. So I just want to make that part is clear. With that being said, we should be very clear with politicians that we can't allow for them to be talking about renewables on Monday and plastics and petrochemicals on Thursday. We can't have them going forth and saying that they want to, create this plant that is causing harm, but they're going to have this other plant that's going to benefit that community. We cannot have that kind of schizophrenia in our politics anymore. And we must call it out. And we must be very clear on that moving forward. And so as I wrap up here, and I look forward to the conversation, I'm excited about where we are as a movement. I think that overall, the tide is turning. I'm so excited to see more young people, women of color, folks from the queer community, folks from the Indigenous community. I'm excited for so many different groups. I'm excited for the genius like Dr. Bullard and Dr. Wright and Peggy Shepard and many others who was giving that for years upon years and still giving it. And I'm excited for the HipHop Caucus, who is creating content that is going out to the world. And that's the one last thing I'll leave you with, that we must use our cultural expression to shape our political experience. We must be mindful that to broaden this movement, we have to do everything we can to tell our story and tell our story effectively. That is how we win on climate. The stakes are very high. We cannot lose this battle. We cannot lose our petrochemicals. We cannot be overburdened with plastics. And I'll end by saying what I told Darren Woods, is that we must end our reliance on plastic. You must change how you do your business. And if ExxonMobil goes out of business, so be it. I'm sure you'll be smart enough to find something else to do. Thank you so much, and all power to the people.
Thank you so much, Reverend Yearwood, for breaking it down, giving us the truth here, and just getting us activated. This is what it's all about. Thank you so much. We're now going to move on to the discussion part of our panel, and I'll start by asking our panelists some questions that were submitted by attendees ahead of time. Please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A, and we can also answer those questions. I want to start kicking off a question to Shamira, and the Rev touched on this, but I think many people need to hear your answer to this question. Someone asked, how can my organization and I be better allies to Black environmental justice leaders and communities?
Thank you so much, Erica, and it's an excellent question. In order to answer this question, I want to first extend appreciation to our allies who whenever we're having a bad day, we lean on you guys. Thank you for your support. My answer to this is we have to reveal the climate deniers. We have to replace them with the people who support our movement. That means if your local politicians do not support this fight, they need to be voted out and replaced. To be our ally, we need you to continue to spread the truth, continue to spread the facts, and continue to call the people out who try to deceive us and gaslight us. In our community, the local politicians try to spread our narrative as if we are against jobs, but they are just gaslighting. They can avoid taking accountability for our lives being sacrificed for their profit. I have an uncle who has died. No, I have an aunt who has died of cancer. My godmother who has passed away from cancer. My uncle has prostate cancer. My other uncle has prostate cancer. Majority of our members in RISE are retired industry workers who have cancer or who have had cancer. Everyone in my community knows someone who has cancer or who has died from cancer. My mom can point out each house and tell you who has cancer in that home. This is not a fallacy. Our parish president has stated that Cancer Rally is a myth in an attempt to gaslight us and to roll out the red carpet for the industries. You can help us from where you are by signing those petitions that I uplifted earlier in my presentation. If you have not done that yet, you can still do that. You can go to risestjames.org and you can find the links to our petitions there. And last but not least, we need you to continue to spread the word of what we are saying. The resistance has already begun in this fight, and you can help us from where you are. You don't physically have to be here, but I offer an invitation to each one of you to come to St. James and let us give you a tour. And we'll feed you and we'll show you what's going on, because it's different when you can smell the pollution and see the pollution and experience the flakes in the air. Thank you.
Thank you, Shamira. And I can attest to that because y'all fed me some really great gumbo when I came to a RISE St. James, Louisiana meeting a few years ago. And I learned so much from all of you. Thank you. I want to ask Dr. Bullard this question. Do you see hope spots for environmental justice that can serve as models of success stories to push forward to maybe communities that are facing injustice today?
Well, of course, yes. You know, having done this work for the last 40 years, what gives me hope to keep going is the fact that we have an intergenerational movement and mobilization. I'm a boomer, proud of it, still fighting, still standing. Like Rev, I wear a lot of hats. I had to go back and put on my real hat. This is time for the Marines to land, and we're not leaving anybody behind. The fact is that we have lots of data, we have the facts, we have the science, but that's not enough. We have to marry all of that with action. And I see young people who are not willing or ready to work on this crisis, and it is a crisis, for 40 years. We don't have 40 years. And so the urgency of now, having people who are in organizations, institutions, in various communities saying, this is my issue. It's not other people's issue. This is my issue. And climate change, climate justice, environmental justice, economic justice, racial justice, gender justice, food and water justice, and political justice and voting. It's all about saving this democracy. We have to understand that we have to be the saviors of our democracy and this planet, because we can't say let somebody else do it. So it's like owning, taking charge, being the stewards, and having that will and that tenacity, like Shamar LaVine, like Miss Imelda West, like Marjorie Shard, like those folks who have come before us and who said family, home, and community. They will go out and travel. You know, Miss Imelda West, which I think is Shamar LaVine's cousin. you know, some of this stuff is stamped in our DNA. We didn't come from the sit down and look tribe. We come from the kick-ass tribe and get it right tribe and make a different tribe. They didn't wait. Miss West went all the way to Tokyo, Japan, and met with the CEO of the parent company of Shintech and put the cross on him and said, you will not, in the name of Jesus, that's what she said, you will not locate in Shintech. And they say that she sprinkled some dust, you know, Louisiana. Now, you know how they kind of like embellish it. But as it turns out, Shintech did not locate in Convent, Louisiana, and build this huge PVC plant. We have to have intergenerational mobilization. That's what gives me hope. We're going to win this because right is on our sides, and we have to bend that curve toward justice. And I think we're doing it. Just has to speed it up.
Thank you, Dr. Bullard, for your service under your many hats. This is amazing. I want to ask all of our panelists, if you are aware of pollution in your community, what are effective ways to tell your neighbors about environmental injustice if they are not already aware, and, you know, give ideas for opportunities to take immediate action so we can keep this top of mind.
Dr. Bullard, go ahead. That's up your alley, Doc.
Oh, you know what we do? We have centers and we have consortia, we have community university partnerships, we have collaboratives. And HBCUs have been the foundation for the last 30 years for getting the community university partnerships, community-based participatory research, and communication out, breaking it down. Every social movement that has been successful in this country, we've had young people and students from HBCUs, we've led it. And so we have to make sure that this is not a sexy topic. This is about life and death, and we choose life. We have to say that our communities that are on the fence line, they are not expendable. We can't say that they can't be sacrificed for the good of the all, because we have plastics, petrochemicals, oil and gas, fossil fuels have not brought about an economic renaissance to our communities. And if you map it, we got all great technology. We got great research tools, and you map it, and all of them will show you that which communities have contributed least to the pollution and the climate change are feeling the pain first, worst, and longest. We have to change that. And so when we talk about how we track and target resources, you know, when President Clinton signed the executive order on environmental justice in 1994, there was no money. But when President Biden signed the executive order on environmental justice and signed the Inflation Reduction Act, it's $60 billion for environmental justice, $60 billion for clean energy transition, So the challenge is making sure that that $160 billion with a B get to those communities that have been left out and left behind. You have to get those communities that historically have been invisible, get in the front of the line. That takes work. Now, faith without work is what? Dead. Our communities are dying and we need to save them, and we need to make sure that they are whole, they're healthy, resilient, and sustainable. This is not rocket science, and a lot of it is political science. We have to fight. And I'll pass the mic.
How about for folks who do not live in EJ communities, but they want to help spread awareness? What can they do, and what kind of talking points might they have to incite their neighbors and communities to action?
Yeah, I can take a stab at this one. So one of the things we noticed about the fossil fuel industry is that they try to go to places that they feel are the path of least resistance. And so one of the things there that it's unfortunate, but a lot of the plants we're talking about now are coupled in most of the same areas. So if you look at Texas is one of those places, Louisiana is one of those places, the Ohio River Valley, in Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania. So you can couple those. But to your point of that, if you're not in those locations, what can you do? I think that goes back to my original thing. I think you are demanding to have environmental justice conversations. That's the first thing. I think that if you're having these conversations and you're leading this if you're in your 350 group up there in Maine, or you're in, up in your Sierra Club and over there in Delaware, wherever you are, if you don't feel, and now there's pollution in those communities too, but I definitely I just want to say that I think that you need to center environmental justice into the conversation. I think the other thing with that's important with centering it is that we need to kind of have some ideas of why that wasn't the case to begin with. The EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, will turn 54 this year, and 53, 54. And so in that process, the larger environmental movement also turns around 53, 54. In other words, most of the organizations, our large organizations, were created between 1968 and 1972. You have NRDC, LCV, Action Network, Aspen, but also what's going on is that there was a burgeoning, as Dr. Bullard put quite well, there was also a burgeoning environmental justice movement. So reason I bring that up is that something happens there, particularly as we get to North Carolina, and in Texas and in Alabama right now, that was in the 80s. There's something here where the movement stopped talking about environmental justice. So what I'm saying here is that what we found out in the movie from Al Gore, An Inconvenient Truth, in 2006, was that the problem wasn't just the climate crisis, it was also white supremacy. And also the fact that people were uncomfortable being allies and fighting for Black and Brown and Indigenous people. So I just want to lift up that you can lift up EJ in your conversations to move things forward in that regard.
Thank you, Rev. We seem to have lost Shamira. I hope she's all right. It might have been an internet issue. Dr. Bullard, do you want to weigh in, get a last word in here?
No, I think Rev handled it very well. I think it's important that we understand that when we talk about climate and climate justice, there's no place on this planet that somehow you can say that it's okay, and that we're talking about climate change being the great equalizer. Even though some communities will be hit first, worst, and hardest, I think we have to, when we talk about solutions, that means we all need to be in those rooms for crafting those solutions that will impact to make us a better world and a better planet. And when we put justice and equity at the center, we make for a better society. When we kind of like bend that curve to reduce that inequality, whether it's wealth or income or gender or racial or whatever, geographic inequality, all of that. I think we have to understand all the dimensions of the justice that we're talking about: climate justice, economic justice, and environmental justice, energy justice. And it's not complicated. Even kids in middle school have lots of projects that they're working on, and I think we can learn from young people because they don't have the same kind of wedge issues that keep us apart. And I think we have to build that intergenerational framework for listening and for solutions.
Thank you so much. I just want to thank all of our panelists as we have to wrap up now, for bringing the people power, the facts, the testimony, and the experience that we really need to listen to, stressing that again, for this extremely valuable and rich conversation. Thank you again.
Thank you for having us.
Thank
I
you.
want to remind our attendees to please mark your calendars for our next webinar on March 28th. Filtered, not bottled water, preventing billions of plastic bottles from flooding U.S. communities, another huge environmental justice issue as the U.S. is undergoing lead pipe replacement often in Black communities. So please get involved. And if you have not already, we would like to invite you to join our global coalition. It is free to join, and you can join as an individual, a business, or a nonprofit organization. And here is information about how to get in touch. And please feel free to connect with us if you are on social media to learn more about our work. We will be sending out a follow-up survey after this webinar, and we really appreciate your feedback to help us improve our future events. We will also be sending, as I mentioned earlier, a recording of this webinar in the coming days so you can share it with anyone who was unable to join us today. And I want to thank everyone for joining, especially our panelists. And thank you to the Plastic Pollution Coalition member groups and partners who shared this webinar with their communities and networks. Your amplification really helps expand our community and spread the word. So we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar on March 28th, and have a good day or evening wherever you are. Thanks again all. Take care.